When I was living in South Carolina, I volunteered every week at the Salvation Army Homeless Shelter as part of my UU congregation's outreach. It was the only place in our area where one could get a full, hot, sit-down meal in need. The dining area was smallish, and it could only seat about 24 people at a time. We fed from 60 to over 100 every weekday in roughly 20-minute rotations. People took a seat, and volunteers served heaping plates and cold drinks at their tables. Early in my tenure there, I was placing a plate in front of a frail elderly man with a walker and noticed he did not have a beverage yet. "What can I get you to drink?" I said in my normal, cheerful voice. He looked up at me, and I was surprised by the direct eye contact. Most of our clients kept their heads down, only conversing with a few of their peers. He spoke directly and calmly. "I should not be here. I have Social Security money, but I have no address or bank now and cannot get it. Sweet tea, please." His attention shifted to his plate. I did not know how to respond and quickly fulfilled his request for tea and moved to the next task. I felt inadequate. I felt like I had failed to respond in a meaningful and compassionate way so much that I scheduled a talk with my minister, the Reverend Deborah Guthrie Joyce. Although she assured me that being there to hear his words was all I could or should do in that bustling environment, I still did not feel I had lived up to the moment. I felt like I should have said or done something more. Thich Nhat Hanh, Vietnamese Buddhist religious leader, teacher, author, and peace activist, said, "Being listened to and heard is one of the greatest desires of the human heart." The ability to listen to our mind and body is crucial to our mental and physical health. Without that skill, we would all be sick and confused. It was in those early years in South Carolina that I first began practicing mindful meditation. I was not sure I was doing it right because I could not keep focused on my breath for 2 solid minutes and questioned what I was supposed to be experiencing. At first, it didn't give me immediate feedback that I could recognize as useful. I had to spend time daily over many, many months listening and accepting what my breath and body were trying to say to me. I began to pay attention to the carousel of thoughts in my mind that I was used to. I was in the habit of playing and replaying, but now in a new way, without judgment. Some of them had been haunting me forever, but only when I suspended judgment could I start to interact with those thoughts and change the narrative of the ones that were invasive and self-defeating. Only then could I discern which were authentic and relevant to my own personal growth. That was a difficult exercise, listening to my authentic self. Another very profound experience I had at that time, and I was having many as a new UU, occurred in the small group sharing circle that, just like the one we have here, used the Soul Matters curriculum to encourage and practice deep listening. At the first few sharing circles I attended, I opted not to speak in my turn. I simply observed the courage and candor of each person to share deep and sometimes painful personal experiences. I thought it was extraordinary, and one day, the topic we were considering stirred something in me, and I spoke about how I felt when it was my turn. The epiphany came after I was finished. No one said anything. The expressions on their faces reflected a kind of love that I was not familiar with. They were listening to me and did not question how I felt or placate my emotions or try to remedy the thing I talked about. They were fully present for me, and I burst into tears. Simon Weil, a French philosopher and political activist, states, "Difficult as it is really to listen to someone in affliction, it is just as difficult for her to know that compassion is listening to her." Thich Nhat Hanh teaches to listen is an art. We actually have to be there to listen. A lot of people don't have that capacity because they don't have the time and they are not trained. It also goes back to our upbringing. If the parent doesn't have the time to just sit there and share with the child, then they will lose this element in the family. They will lose this element in that child's upbringing. An excerpt from a 2021 article in Psychology Today by Dr. Jesse Stern and Rachel Sampson states, "Deep listening is an investment in our relationships, in intimacy, and understanding other people. We stand to learn so much about our children, partners, ancestors, community members, and those we perceive as other through this practice. Deep listening doesn't come naturally to all of us. It may even seem counterintuitive in our culture of quick fixes and endless scrolling for fast advice. Just as I had to practice, fail, and try again to listen to myself in mindful meditation, I began a process over time of paying attention to how I was listening to people. I used to think that in order to be heard, I had to talk a lot. I used to think that in order to demonstrate that I was listening, I had to make a relevant response. I had felt so inadequate when I had no response for the gentleman in the shelter kitchen. Dr. Rachel Naomi Remen, a renowned physician, author, educator, and pioneer of the humanistic approach to healthcare, relates this experience. One of my patients told me that when she tried to tell her story, people often interrupted her to tell her that they once had something just like that happen to them. Subtly, her pain became a story about them. Eventually, she stopped talking to most people. It was just too lonely. I'm trying hard to change the listening behaviors I now recognize as part of my own upbringing and insecurities. It isn't always easy, and I am grateful for these words by Dr. Stern and Rachel Sampson from the same Psychology Today article I quoted earlier. Be gentle with yourself. Many people didn't experience deep listening in their childhood and enter adulthood with a limited capacity for listening to and being with others' emotions. we tend to fall back on the communication styles and habits that we experienced in our family of origin, even if they are unhelpful in our adult relationships. Notice when these old tendencies are present and appreciate that it takes time to learn to communicate differently. Thankfully, deep listening does not require perfection. It requires awareness and a willingness to practice coming back home to those we love again and again. In our sharing circle here, we have a covenant that encourages and provides a safe space to practice deep listening. We covenant to honor our greater UUCSH covenant, to use I language and take ownership of what we say, to listen without judgment, to speak in turn, to honor confidentiality, to assume best intentions of those sharing, to listen for understanding, not to agree with or to believe. We seek to ask clarifying or open-ended questions, wanting an understanding of each other, and will avoid comments aimed at fixing others or changing minds. This space is for soul matters and not current events or social justice concerns. We agree to honor silence and time for reflection, and very importantly, to attend as regularly as possible. Listening in our wider community is no different. We can live our values by observing the tenets of this covenant, even if the other person is unaware of our practice. When we listen without judgment, it reflects our value of interdependence, acknowledging our place in the web of all existence. In honoring a person's need to be heard as a complete act of love itself, a response by you is not always needed. There will be other opportunities for you to speak. When we assume best intentions and seek an understanding of each other, we are enacting equity, that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. When we refrain from comments that aim to fix a situation or change another's mind, we are uplifting pluralism, respecting diverse cultures, experiences, and beliefs. When we honor silence and time for reflection, we are cultivating gratitude and hope that our value of generosity asks of us. When we hold space for others to share openly, we begin the work of justice, seeking a community where all feel welcome and can thrive. Perhaps that is what Mr. Rogers was alluding to when he said, listening is where love begins. And quite possibly, the transformation we seek may only happen if we adapt to the changing world by listening with love at the center. The Reverend Dr. Sandra Fees says, here's where Unitarian Universalists sometimes get off track. Sometimes you mistake the focus on listening to self with a fierce individualism and interdependence. The worth and dignity of every person, every self, sometimes gets used to prioritize one individual without an equal concern for relationships and community. But listening to self actually turns out to be inseparable from listening to others. Just as honoring each person's worth and dignity is inseparable from honoring the interconnection of all people. So the attentiveness to the self is inextricably related to attentiveness to the other, to a greater wholeness. As Dag Hammarskjöld says, the more faithfully you listen to the voice within you, the better you will hear what is sounding outside. I would like to end by hearing from Thich Nhat Hanh himself, speaking about compassionate listening in a brief excerpt from a 2012 interview with Oprah Winfrey. May his words be so.
Deep listening is the kind of listening that can help relieve the suffering of the other person. You can call it compassionate listening. You listen with only one purpose, help him or her to empty his heart. And if you remember that you are helping him or her to suffer less, and then even if he say things full of wrong perceptions, full of bitterness, you are still capable to continue to listen with compassion. Because you know that listening like that, with compassion, you give him or her a chance to suffer less. If you want to help him or her to correct his perception, and then you wait for another time, but for this, the time being, you just listen with compassion and help him or her to suffer less. And 1 hour like that can bring transformation and healing. So fear, the anger, and the despair is born on the ground of wrong perception. And we have wrong perceptions concerning ourselves and the other person. And that is the foundation for conflict and war and violence.
You've said that the only way we can begin to end war is due to communication between people.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And we should be able to say like this, dear friends, dear people, I know that you suffer a lot. I have not understood enough of your difficulties and suffering. It's not our intention to make you suffer more. It is the opposite. So please tell us about your suffering, your difficulties. I'm eager to learn to understand. It has to start like that, loving speech. And if we are honest, if we are true, they will open their heart and tell us. And then we practice compassionate, deep listening. And during the process of deep listening, we can learn so much about our own perception and their perceptions. Mm-hmm. And that is the best way, the only way to remove terrorism.
Terrorism or even difficulties between yourself and
yes.
family members or friends.
Yes.